Do you think you could still fight if you got punched right in the face? Well, this pirate did, and he was able to defeat his opponent despite having zero depth perception and only being able to see half the picture. He was essentially fighting with one eye open and the other one completely shut. It's an absolutely terrifying disadvantage to have in a fight. But it just goes to show the incredible grit and determination of these warriors, who would fight each other to the death. What happened to the man who fought like this, though? We don't know. But what we do know is the stories behind some of the most brutal injuries seen in human history. And in today's video, we're going to tell you about them all. A few weeks ago, a video was posted by a user showing a man whose eye had been completely punched out of its socket. Blood was pouring down his cheek and onto the floor. To say this guy was in pain would be a horrific understatement. But the question everybody had was, how on earth did this happen? Well, after the video was posted, the backstory finally came out. It turns out the man had been hanging around with a bad crowd, specifically a group of people from a rival gang. Things were said, and now they were going to pay for it. The man who had written the caption on the original post later told the story of how his friend was approached by a member of the rival gang, who provoked him and asked him if he wanted to fight. This wasn't like the guy to back down from a challenge, so he agreed to the fight. But there was a twist, because when they went outside to fight, they were met by a ton of members from the other gang. Clearly outnumbered, the man didn't back down. He was willing to take on all of them at once. The eyewitness said that the man didn't stand a chance. He was beaten up and attacked from all sides until eventually he got punched so hard in the eye that it popped right out of its socket. The eye didn't land on the ground. Instead, it landed in the hands of the person who had attacked him. They then walked away laughing, leaving the poor man in a pool of blood. As you can imagine, the man was rushed to the hospital where he was treated for his injuries. Thankfully, the eye couldn't be put back into its socket, but the damage was done. Now he will never be the same again. Now, the worst part about all of this is that the police haven't caught the attacker yet. If you have any information about the whereabouts of this individual, please contact your local law enforcement agency. So it might be obvious why this man lost his eye. But what about pirates? We all know they were tough and hardcore individuals, but how did they manage to survive with bad eyes? After all, depth perception is extremely important when you're sailing around the high seas. Without it, you could easily crash into another ship and get killed. Or maybe that's how they learned how to navigate the waters. Well, what actually happens when you lose an eye? How does it affect your life? Is it possible to live with only one eye? Yes, it is. But it comes with quite a few disadvantages. According to Healthline, many people are able to live their lives normally even after losing an eye. But of course, this depends on the circumstances surrounding the loss of the eye. For example, was it caused by a disease or injury? If it was caused by an injury, there's a good chance that the remaining eye might also be affected. And people who have lost an eye might also experience phantom pain in the empty socket, which can be unbearable at times. But the biggest disadvantage is probably the lack of depth perception. After all, our two eyes work together to give us the ability to judge distances, because we see things from slightly different angles. We're able to perceive the world in 3D. But without two eyes, it becomes difficult to judge distances. So how did the pirates manage to cope? Well, luckily for them, they had an ace up their sleeves, something that allowed them to make up for their lack of depth perception. See, instead of having both eyes on the same side of the head, humans would have them on opposite sides. This allows for binocular vision, which is essential for judging distance. However, many animals have eyes on the same side of their head, which means they only have monocular vision. But it seems that this doesn't really affect their ability to get around. In fact, studies have shown that animals such as goats and cats are able to compensate for their lack of binocular vision in much the same way that pirates did. Even if they can't judge distances, they are still able to see things pretty clearly. They achieve this by tilting their heads from side to side while looking at an object. By doing this, they're able to see the object from slightly different angles, which gives them a better sense of depth perception. And surprisingly, this works pretty well. Of course, it's not perfect. Animals can't judge distances as accurately as humans can, but it's good enough to get by. The same thing happened to pirates. They learned to tilt their heads in order to make up for their lack of depth perception. It wasn't easy, but after years of practice, it became second nature. But even with this ability, it's unlikely that they could have won a fight against someone who didn't have a bad eye. But we all know that pirates fought in many battles, and many of them survived, so there must be more to the story. Surprisingly, pirates were actually able to get away with having only one eye open during fights. After all, they were trained to fight with swords and pistols. And with a little bit of practice, they were able to master the art of fighting with one eye closed. That's right, pirates were trained to fight with a bad eye. It wasn't easy. But after years of practice, they were able to master the art of fighting with only one eye open. This meant that they were able to fight with a certain level of accuracy, but they were also able to protect themselves from incoming attacks. Of course, this isn't exactly ideal, but it was good enough to help them win many battles. But there's another reason why pirates were able to get away with having only one eye open during fights. You see, pirates weren't exactly known for their honorable behavior. They were willing to do whatever it took to win a fight, no matter how dirty or cowardly it was. This meant that they weren't afraid to gouge out their opponent's eyes, leaving them blinded and helpless. So if a pirate had a bad eye, it wasn't exactly a disadvantage. In fact, it made them even more terrifying opponents. But what about fighting without an eye? Well, that's also possible. There are many documented cases of warriors who have fought and won battles with only one eye. One of the most famous examples is the Scottish warrior, Blind Harry. Legend has it that Harry was a giant of a man who could take on multiple opponents at once. He was undefeated in battle and was eventually given the title of the uncrowned King of Scotland. But Harry wasn't born blind. In fact, he was known for his keen eyesight. But during a battle, he was struck in the eye by a piece of wood. This left him blinded in that eye, but it didn't stop him from continuing to fight. He went on to win many more battles, proving that it's possible to fight without an eye. But what about regular people? Can they fight if they only have one eye? Well, it depends on the person. Some people are naturally more aggressive and are able to fight even if they're blinded. Others are naturally more peaceful and would never dream of harming another person. So there's no easy answer to this question. It all depends on the person. Now check out, what does it mean when someone looks at you with only one eye open, or check out this video instead.